Berman, bringing the courage today to Dying to Live. How are you?
I'm good. Great to see you.
Great to see you as well. It's been a while.
Has been a while, but I think this is like a great sort of place to start where you meet people along the way in other lives, and you're
Yes.
like, oh, she's cool. Yeah, I want to spend. I'd like to hang out with her. I mean, not in this context because it was different business, different time, but we've both kind of done some different things since the 1.0 versions of ourselves.
Oh, yes, we have. And, it was a couple years ago when I think we both started on a new path of sorts. You had decades in marketing and creative and agency life and being a consultant, and you'd worked with dozens and dozens and dozens of companies trying to lead them to their true north and helping them realize how to be successful in this crazy world. And then you amplified your path closer to your soul in a very different way, which is what I want to hear about today. And courage, of course, topical for this podcast and our listeners because living closer to your soul takes a lot of courage.
Yeah, I would say I clarified my path more than amplified my path.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah. Tell,
Right. I
tell
mean,
us
I
about
think
that.
I think that's what a lot of this is all about is look, we're living in an absurdly cloudy time as it is, right? With the pandemic and the fact that we have this sort of loneliness epidemic happening at the same time. And then you think about how, and what a surprise, we know each other from business first. So I'll start there. You think about how decisions are made or not made.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You've got a board telling you one thing and a CEO trying to drive something else. Meanwhile, your team who's probably closest to the work is telling you something else, and you've got a peer telling you something else. And the next thing you know, you're looking at 12 doors. You don't know which one to go through, and therefore you go through none,
Right.
right? Because you're just afraid, and it's cloudy. And so I think it starts with really figuring out, get clear fast as possible why you're wired the way you're wired. And if we had 2 minutes, if this is a 2 minute podcast, then I'll get it out now and people can get back to their lives. But like, I do wish we would spend less time scrolling social media and other people's lives and more time scrolling ourselves and trying to figure out why we're wired the way we are.
Oof. Yeah, that's powerful. How have you done that?
I got really lucky. That's just the truth. I thought I was writing a book to deviously position a company in fish taco land called San Diego. Like, how do I compete with New York and LA and San Francisco? And this is my own stuff, right? And you hired a company at one point that was in San Diego, and we felt like we couldn't win the golf course conversation, which was maybe somebody would like us, but then have to go to another decision maker, and they'd be like, "Who? Where are they? Where do they live? Why
Mm-hmm.
don't you choose someone in New York?"
Mm-hmm.
So the original idea was I had stumbled on Courage Brands, and I was like, I love what that sounds like. I don't know what it means, but I like what it sounds like. And in order to really understand what a courage brand could be, you had to go back and really understand what courage is. And that kind of sort of like led me on this 3-year listening tour where I got to sit with what I call the 3 Bs: the brave, the bullish, and the brainiac. And on the brave side, I got to sit with Navy SEALs and tornado chasers and astronauts and just try to understand how they do what they do and why do they do what they do. I mean, how could a Navy SEAL know they're going to see live bullets and still go do that? And I was fascinated by that process. I honestly, in that sort of section of the brave, one of my first in-person interviews was with the founding astronaut of Virgin Galactic. Her name's Loretta Hidalgo. They're up in Orange County. It's like 6 months into the book writing process. I don't really know what I'm writing at this point. And I'm like more terrified to ask somebody smart a stupid question.
Mm.
Don't ask that. Don't ask the astronaut a dumb question. And before our trays even hit the table at lunch, she says to me, "So, what makes you qualified to write a book about courage?" Touche, astronaut. Well, I've
Ooh.
been writing pithy one-liners on Twitter for a living. That's pretty courageous. And she said, no. Your brain is doing that. I didn't tell you to write this book. Like, part of your journey is to figure out why you're writing this book. And she proceeds to tell me that her definition of success is when there's no daylight between the personal you and the professional you.
Ooh.
Oh, yes.
Ooh.
Oh, yes.
Well, let's pause there for a minute. Whew. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I remember being in my car driving back to San Diego with like my knuckles in the 10 and 2 position in silence, thinking about 20 years in the service business, maybe surrendering myself 1% of time a year over 20 years to satisfy someone else's vision that I may or may not have agreed to. And there's only a few places in life where I can honestly remember where I really sacrificed. Like, oh, this is the third idea. Let's just present it. So we present 3 ideas and the CEO falls in love with it. And then I surrender and we present that idea and it doesn't work. Of course, the idea never works.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, at that moment, the book changed for me. And I kind of feel like I was Rocky. I got to go to the metaphorical woods and chop wood and get myself strong. And like, how could you teach other people to be courageous if you're not going to be courageous yourself? And so that was sort of the big joke that I wrote the book to position my last creative agency. And everything I learned was like, get out. It gave me the courage to fire myself and to start courageous. And I do feel like this is me. So like, I'm very at peace with all the things that are scary that you're like, you know, you leave a company that you built and 70 people and resources and you go back to yourself and like 2 other people and here we go. But 18 months in, gosh, if I can do this the rest of my life, I'd be really happy because it gives me permission to have brutally honest conversations with leaders and people about, do you know who you are? Are you clear? Right, we're back to clarity.
Yeah.
And are you surrounding yourself with the right people off of that?
Well, I remember even when we were working together, I remember that you were always the person in the room who would say, so we have some ideas. Here's the one that we feel really strongly about. And then here's a couple more. And we'll give you these others. But this is the one that you should really go with.
Yeah.
And usually in an agency situation, you have folks that just want to make you happy. And that was a little different. It was a little divergent. And I remember thinking, well, that's a solid dude. Someone that's going to stand up for the idea, even if he knows we probably won't adopt it.
I should have only presented the one idea. Like, we have one idea for you today. Let's see where this goes. Would have even a shorter engagement probably if we would have done that.
Probably.
Yeah. So,
yeah, that's not really the agency model. Here's one idea, like it or don't.
Here's one idea is a really good name of an agency, by the way. Maybe I'll get back into the agency game. Anyway, this could go on for a while. So yeah, I mean that's kind of where what took me to today is, I mean, I still believe courageous ideas are the only ones that matter. And I do believe when we're not there to defend ideas, people are busy. Like you don't have anybody's undivided attention. You know, you have like 8% and they're thinking about their kids or argument they had with the spouse or just life. And so if you don't have an idea with tension, it's hard to break through. And what really, like I said, as I kept going down this path, and even Return on Courage is written more like a documentary. It wasn't like, I'm so smart and here's Ryan Berman's 20 tips to getting ahead. It was more like, oh, wow, this is the next part of the story. We have the wrong idea what courage is. I wonder if I could come up with a definition that could help you in real time. So when you need courage, you know that it's a courageous move versus a careless move or an impulsive move or a theoretical thing that's actually a practical thing that you can instill into your life and then use that everywhere you go. You want the definition?
You tell me your definition.
So I'll start with the dictionary definition, which is a terrible definition. and go back to like Ryan Berman, nervous Ryan Berman, right? Because who am I to judge the dictionary? Really?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
You know, I didn't go to Harvard. And so the dictionary definition is the ability to do something that frightens one. And who wants to do that? And then yeah, it's a pretty small group, probably. Right?
Yeah.
I have no data to say that, but my sense is probably not a big group. Then layer that on with work. Like, not only do you not want to do terrifying things in life, like I definitely don't want to do that in the office or whatever this thing is called now with the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the chief executive officer of my family, my wife, has zero interest in leaving San Diego. So I have to be very careful what I say not to get fired, right? And so yeah, and by the way, we're not rewarding courageous behavior. Most of us are rewarded on an annual basis. So you're rewarded just to like stick your neck out just enough to get noticed, but not really noticed.
Mm-hmm.
Get to the next review. Maybe you get a corner office or a new title and a little bump, and your life stays as it is. And so then you go back to this definition, and I'm like, okay, how is this even useful? Like, where's the utility in doing something that's frightening? That's probably the last thing I'm thinking about in a hard project. So, you know, after talking to Navy SEALs and astronauts, talking to people at Google and Amazon and Apple, talking to people like clinical psychologists that understand like the way that we're wired. Actually, the first sort of big aha moment I had coming out of that process was, all right, I wonder if this is a better definition. And there's three levers to it. It's knowledge plus faith plus action equals courage.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to be all three. And if you think about business, you're never going to have every bit of knowledge you need to make a call. And if you think you're going to have 100% of the data, you're going to be waiting a really long time. And you will get passed by a competitor you see or a competitor you don't. So where's the line on how much knowledge you need? To where you start feeling like, okay, this is the right move, which is the faith piece. And, you know, we don't mean faith in the religious sense. We mean it in the, do you believe in this? Do you believe in this guy? Do you believe in this idea? Do you believe in this team? So that's the faith piece. And then how often have you known the right thing to do and you felt it was the right thing to do? And you're like, why can't I go here? Like, what's going on here? That's the action piece. And so, yeah, the irony here is 2 of 3 in any direction is not courageous. Right? Knowledge and faith without action is paralysis.
Mm-hmm.
And faith and action without knowledge is a reckless move. And then knowledge and action without faith, if you're numb on the inside, you're probably working on status quo. You're working on safe. And so even in the idea space, you know, if you're numb and you put that idea out into the ether, mixed in with 1,000 other ideas, and you're out there to defend it, it's just going to fall flat. It's not going to be a meaningful move. So to me, it starts there. It starts with like knowledge plus faith plus action equals courage. All right, so which knowledge should we be following? Like, how do you actually build internal and external faith with teams or customers? And then where do you take action and where do you not take action? And that became like the next phase of the book writing process. Is going to get really, really clear on those next steps.
Wow, because I think a lot of organizations spend most of their time in the paralysis, I would say. You know, gathering the data, got to have the data, and then they just sit on the data without doing anything with it, or it's an overage of data consumption without action. And so that action piece, like when you work with organizations, moving them toward that action piece, that has to be maybe one of the biggest hurdles, I would assume.
I mean, I think if you've hired us, then not so much. Like you've already made the conscious choice. I mean, that's sort of the whole design of courageous. Like you don't see us or think about us if you don't think that you're open to change.
Have you been hired by like one person, and then you get there, you start working with folks, and suddenly you realize, oh, maybe not everyone has bought into this. Maybe not everyone has moved toward that action phase yet.
Only every engagement. Well, you know, but it makes sense. You know, it's like maybe there's someone that mirrors our point of view and knows the organization needs more courage. I mean, if things were perfect, you wouldn't hire us, right? I mean, there has to be a willingness for change. If my phone's going to ring, it's like, you know, we could use a little injection of courage. And I've one of the lines I'm fiddling around with, you're always a good like test because you're in the space is like, and I don't think this is like a line that's going to go in a marketing thing, but like in a phone call is like, you really hire us like when you're ready to have the courage to right. So if you want to re-energize your people or re-energize your team, or you need to like rethink an idea or reimagine tomorrow, that reinvention or piece, then that's when you hire somebody like us. And it's that revolution, basically. We don't see ourselves as an evolution company. It's more of like, what's the full revolution to what you're going to do next? And does the team, are they in? Are they re-energized? Do they want to be here? Has anybody actually asked them that question? Might be afraid of what you get, right? But in the spirit of the podcast, like I think there are a lot of people that are dead inside companies.
You know what I love about this too is that there's so much vulnerability in this process, and of course, and
Yeah.
we know that vulnerability is the ultimate, human connector. And so you also then get to get down to that human level through this process and really connect with people that you work with to build something on a non-corporate level.
Well, it's just sort of sad that we've gotten. How did we get here? I have no idea. And
I don't know, the patriarchy, capitalism. There's a few things we could cite probably for
so
another
here we are.
podcast.
And to your point, I mean, if how do we strip away certain words and adapt to other words like relationships, basic
Mm.
relationships? Like, can you have an honest conversation with someone? I have a lot of faith in the next generation. I really, really do. I don't like I feel very good about not tomorrow, but tomorrow's tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're sort of lucky. At least I feel lucky that I've now seen enough 20 years of doing this, 20 years of doing this, where I almost feel like a translator between old guard and new guard.
Mm-hmm.
And like just talking to the C-suites about, how do you inspire that next generation? And, they can't wrap their head around like, well, why don't they want to just put their head down and work for 20 years for a watch?
Right.
Like, there's a watch on their phone that tells them exactly what time it is. And I'm like, yeah, if you don't inspire them, if there's not a true purpose behind what you're doing, you're going to have massive attrition problems, massive. And then you're going to have to train all those people new things, and you just lost all this time. And it's just a different game, just a different game right now. But it just comes down to like a little bit of curiosity, a little bit of empathy,
Mm.
vulnerability, as you said it, admitting when you don't know something. Does anybody, really know?
Ooh, I mean, speaking of old guard, that is like the ultimate no-no, admitting that you don't know something. That's really a game changer. It shouldn't be, but it is.
No, and I think that's exactly it. That's like the most like the best leader could admit that they don't know. What's the other? There's people that know what they know. They know what they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know that they don't know. That's the scariest one
That's
by
the
far.
scary. Yes.
And for some reason, I seem to always find myself working with throughout my career. But I always have to be careful with that with my team now. I'm like, hey, keep me honest. Like, what am I not seeing?
Mm. I say that too, or the classic, perhaps I've given direction at some point that now I'm not remembering because my brain shrinks over time. Please point out that this direction came from me. Or, don't be afraid to tell me, you made this decision, you said this,
Yeah.
and keeping me honest as well. And I think it makes such a difference.
I think we remember our best boss and our worst, and like everything else fades away.
Yeah.
And I can remember my worst, and thankfully that was a long time ago, where I would just watch this guy in New York who just like wasn't focused at all, and like we were in a big 700 person high school of an agency, and he would just like, I'm like, I think he's like trying to date everybody who works here, and not focused on the work. And I remember even a couple of years ago, he saw something what I was doing with the book, and it was kind enough that he shared it. But he's like, I was this person's mentor, and you're like,
Oh,
ugh. It's like, wow, like
overstated.
self awareness issues clearly. But
Well,
so
I think what you just said is interesting about being the connector between kind of the old and the new. And I really feel like more and more that Gen X, that is our role
hmm.
in this world.
Yeah, I wonder if like, well, what a surprise. We just happen to be the age where that makes the most sense. But we are like, what are we, a decade and a half? And that's about the pocket that Gen X is.
Yeah, tiny.
And what I love about you, and I think I fall into the same camp, is this: you can't turn off the curiosity. Like, it's just, I'm going to continue to follow this thing and see where it takes me and learn, and then as a observationalist, try to share what I've learned, and you hope you're helping people along the way. And I do have a lot, like there's a lot of up and coming, even in the creative agency space, like CEOs who are just at that age where they want to be great, and they're afraid to be themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
so they put on this front, and you're like, you don't have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Trust me, you have a great product and a great work ethic. And and you're a work in progress like all of us are, and don't be afraid to embrace that.
I think
And
that's what's great too about the younger generation is that they're actually demanding that authenticity. They can see through it right away and they will ask you, they will challenge whether or not you are being authentic.
which is such a us word,
It is.
authenticity.
Hmm.
No, it's like really like if we the fact that we have to bring it up, it's like not really on their radar. That's not true because even one of the people I'm thinking about, he means well, but there's a bit of fake it till you make it
Mm-hmm.
involved, which is probably my least favorite. There's not a lot of things I hate. That's up there. And
Mm-hmm.
I actually have a T-shirt that I wear when I'm doing keynotes, which is "Mistake it till you make it."
Like
So
that.
I think I'm going to start selling that. But I think it's just more honest. I just think it's more. I mean, this is the problem with branding. Uh, Everybody's trying to have this perfect brand, and when you think about people that you love, celebrities, people, whatever, you love them for their imperfections. You love them for the opposite,
Absolutely.
right? And so, Domino's, whether you love their pizza or not, right?
Do
The
love their
minute they
pizza.
told, I love their pizza too, and the minute they told America that they messed up, and they showed like their pizza sticking to a box, and they said, "Oh yes, we did. We changed everything. We heard you. We listened to you,"
Mm-hmm.
and they embraced the imperfection, the imperfect part of their business. Like, guess what? America comes back in waves, and so I don't know. I think there's something there. Like, I want brands to like be more human. Don't be afraid to be imperfect, and I think it'll be a better example for society in general.
Yeah. You know, the brand that I work for right now, Addie Bauer, we took a big stand this year for Black Lives Matter. And that was the first time in decades that we'd taken a stand on a social issue. And um, it was high time that we did so, and also, felt really great to be at the forefront of that conversation, standing up for something that we believed in, no matter what customers had to say back to it. And that is what people want from brands right now, the brands that are going to survive. And you have a great stat about this that I'd love you to bring up about the brands and the companies that have died over time and why. But
Mm-hmm.
the brands that are living true to their own brand souls, those are the ones that are going to survive.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to lose the wrong customers.
Exactly.
Like, what do you what this is so one of the big aha moments for me this throughout the book was this this sort of kin relationship between fear and courage. Like, you don't get to courage if you don't go through fear.
Mm-hmm.
But what do most of us do? We suppress fear versus address fear.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to have the conversation even with ourselves, so we just turn our cheeks on it even though we hear that little voice. And so all we're trying to do is be a little bit more honest about fear and make it less emotional. I'm a big Seinfeld fan, so I like to say we're in the fear shrinkage business. You haven't watched Seinfeld? It's an old television show. This is for the younger viewers.
I was going to say, are you schooling me on
No,
this?
no, 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 no. And yeah, it's like, okay, so what's the vertical fear? Like, what's the industry fear that could take the whole vertical down? And you're even the industry fear, you have one. Or what's the product fear? Like, where could the product be better?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Eddie Bauer, like, I'm sure you're you're clearly closer, but I never felt like there was a product fear. In fact, I was like, this is good stuff. Like, someone's done well here.
Mm-hmm.
But lots of companies like, where could the product be better? Like, let's not lie to ourselves on this. And then perception fears, which is marketing. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
we always thought we were this. For whatever reason, the world thinks we're that. How do we start to shift that? And then service fears, customer service side, and then the personal fear, which I think is a lot of what this conversation is about. Is,
Mm-hmm.
I think you're even in a watch your back culture or got your back culture.
Right.
And if you're in a watch your back culture, it's you're on eggshells all the time. Like, you can't like even focus on anybody but keeping yourself safe. And people feel that. They feel the fear in the culture. And when you're in a got your back culture, it's different. I think fear breeds fear and courage breeds courage. So in some ways, this exercise, which is the better way to SWOT, by the way, for those who know the SWOT analysis, which has somehow
Oh,
survived 60 years in the top of the podium.
if I never see a SWAT again.
It's just not clear. I mean, that seems to be the theme, I guess, for this. Like, my strength is an opportunity. My weakness is an opportunity. My weakness is a threat. It's like, did we make any progress here at all? So it's hard to like shrink down fears if you don't know what they are. And I think the companies that are winning are really proactive about sensing what that fear is well before they need to react to it. And then you start to build a muscle on how to be courageous because you keep proactively addressing fears before you're reacting to them, or worse, you're inactive altogether, which they're out there too. And so, yeah, I think fear, like, what if fear was your best friend? Like, what if I don't like FOMO, I like FOMF, fear of missing fear. Like, if you don't have a fear, go find one and then shrink it down. And for you, it's probably this. Like, how long have you been wanting to do this?
This podcast? Years.
All right, so pull the Ryan Berman string. Courage is regret insurance. Do you feel
100%.
happier that you're doing this?
Oh, well, for one thing, starting it during this COVID time has been the best timing because where professional life might have been focused on shoring things up, continuing the work, making sure it all continues, and there's some creative aspect to that for sure, but this has really been also the creative aspect and the feeding of the soul aspect of the last few months. And yeah, I mean, it fills up my cup for sure. There's a lot of joy in this.
I mean, that's how I feel about all the stuff I'm doing, the podcast and every Friday we're doing these action chats where it's just a conversation in Zoom and we're bringing people with perspective together. Even one of the big sort of misses, I think, from my last creative agency life is because we didn't appropriately clarify what we were, there'd be times where we would take on a client and then 90 days in you would know it's like not a good fit. Both direct. Sometimes we weren't a good fit either. So I think like that, if life is only about, there's 340 million people in the US, like you need like 20 people. That's it. Like, how do you design life to find those 20 people? Like the laws of attraction, the people you should be spending your time with. And don't spend time trying to convince other people that shouldn't be doing. It's just your logics don't match up. So I want to spend my time with people that want to be courageous, that want to stretch. Maybe they don't know how to do it yet, but like they're curious about doing something new or pushing forward. And that's what lights me up. And that's not how I felt when you and I met. Like I didn't feel like I could fully be myself. And I think the emotional side of this is courage makes you happier when you actually go through with something, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. And, attracting those 20 people, you get there by being more of yourself, by putting that out into the world, not whatever it is that you have mechanized before that. Because then you're attracting the wrong people, and that leads you down a totally erroneous path.
Do you feel like since you put this out in the world, like the people that you've met, are they coming out of the woodworks?
Yes. As it happens.
Yeah. That was what courage was for me. So I was afraid. I remember being afraid to, first of all, I was terrified to write a book because in my own family, I'm the least qualified person to do that. So I had all that stuff stuck in my head. But I remember when I finally put it out on Facebook, and it was New Year's Eve, and I'm like, this year I'm writing a book. Here's what the book is. Here's who I've interviewed. Facebook community keep me honest, so I had them hold me accountable.
I remember that. Yeah.
Send, and they're off. The little bird goes into Facebook. The amount of DMs I got from people that are like, oh my gosh, you need to interview this person and hear their story. Hey, I don't know if you knew this. So the thing I was most afraid of, which was my own inadequacies, followed by some of them steal my idea.
Right.
Then got better. It got better. And to me, it's like, wow, I think this is like the powerful good part of social media. Right. And so I am, to your point, like there's a big difference between when you feel like you know what you should do in your head.
Mm-hmm.
This is when you actually verbalize it. And so I'm definitely in the stated and create it space, like put it out in the ether and watch what happens.
Yeah, I am too. I used to be afraid of that as well. If I put it out there, then someone will steal it. But the more I talk about um, largely the program that I have in development right now to folks, the more I'm getting resources and things are coming my way that are going to help bring that to life.
Mm-hmm.
And not once have I experienced with this podcast or anything else the negative side that I assumed would be there.
Mm-hmm. And I just think that's our standard operating system. So again, this isn't me. I went to TVR school. This is me talking to like a whole slew of smart people and who study the thing that drives all of our decisions, which
Yeah.
is called your nervous system.
Yes.
I mean, it's right there, right? Central nervous system, like central at the core of you, system. You're an operating system. Nervous. Don't do that. Don't try that. Don't say that. Don't move there. And
And
so,
it's meant to keep us safe, right? It has
Mhm.
roots in keeping us safe. But keeping us safe from getting eaten by a tiger is not the same as what being safe in this modern world is. And so you do have to work with that and you have to reframe for yourself what that means.
risk management divisions are also meant to keep companies safe. There's no courage management division, which I always love to bring up. Where's the courage management team? And I think if you're talking about being risk averse, unbeknownst to you, you're courage averse. And it's the same thing in the body, right? It's like, yeah, it's designed to keep you safe. It doesn't mean that should be the decision you make every single time. And the way that the book Return on Courage is even written, like the front half is the why now, like why now of all things do I think we absolutely need courage, and why I feel strongly that it's a competitive advantage. And the back half is the how. It's like, great, we talked to Tears about our why, know your why, find your why. But once you have that, how do you do it? Like, walk me through it step by step, deconstruct it. And this was hard for me to say at first because I'm not a brain surgeon or an immunologist, but like I was like, oh wow, I wonder if I could develop someone's what I call central courage system to
Mm-hmm.
combat their central nervous system. And if imagine if your company had this living, breathing, pumping central courage system to make decisions off of, that's the advantage. If you're building that system, knowing that 95% of companies are stuck in freeze or flight, and you're part of the 5% that is fighting. The statistic you probably wanted me to bring up about 20 minutes ago, by the way, was that 52% of the Fortune 500 since 2000 are now gone.
Mm-hmm.
And that number is going to hold. And you're going to have 9,000 brands that rattle on and off the Fortune 500 over the next 6 decades. John Chambers, outgoing CEO of Cisco, predicts 40% of all companies will be dead in a decade. That was 3 years ago.
Mm.
So, I love these statistics because for whatever reason, people don't think statistics have anything to do with them when they're negative, and I'm like, look, like, I wish there was a better metaphor, but I can't think of one. It's like, just assume your company will get cancer at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the diagnosis comes out that your business has cancer, and you have two choices. You're going to even do the poor me, why me, or you could put a plan in place to fight it and get healthy and stay positive and do what you need to do to get the brand healthy. And I think that's kind of what it is. Imagine if, by the way, if your insides of your company could talk for lots of them, they would tell you that the toxicity is spreading all over the place anyway. And it's not a surprise that the culture is what it is. But if you can flip that and you can get healthy, then you can start moving forward. That's the stuff like the type of work we love to do. It's like helping people figure out what business they're really in, bring in the feeling. Don't be afraid to bring in the feeling. We're human, and then inject that soul, as you said at the beginning. I mean, in some ways, this is such a great conversation for me, honestly, because behind the curtains at Courageous, we're like, we're sort of in the soul ID business.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is the soul of the company? And then how do we integrate? We're soul integrators. Like, how do we integrate that everywhere? Finance, marketing, product, customer. Like, it should be one idea that's integrated all over the organization.
That builds the central courage system.
You're hired. When can you start?
Yes. I love this. And I love too, like, I'm thinking about how this translates I know this is for organizations, but to an individual level, because there's so many parallels with the work I do in the death industry, knowledge, faith, and action, and how much more meaningful your life is when you start thinking about and embracing your death early on, and you build that knowledge and you have the faith, and then you take the action in terms of doing paperwork and talking to your loved ones and figuring out what it is that you want for your death, because that helps you identify what it is that you want for your life.
Yeah. And it's sort of sad. And this is why you're in the space. Like, it's why are you waiting so long?
Right.
Right. So, like, I think you're spot on. And, someone once said to me, it takes you 40 years to figure out who you are and the next 40 to be that person.
Ugh, so true.
I
But
mean, it's
why?
kind of spot on. Well, I think, I think survival. Have you watched the movie Boyhood?
I have not.
Okay. There's maybe that's your weekend.
I
I
have
don't
an
know.
assignment now. Yes.
Uh, Basically, Richard Linklater, he shoots this movie, and he has his kids come back every 7 years to shoot the next part of the movie.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. I've heard of this.
And looking at that, it's like, oh my gosh, how did any of us get out of that alive? Like, how did any of us survive the angst and the tension and the peer pressure and the king of the jungle and all the bad stuff that you learn along the way when there's no supervision? and
Mm-hmm.
then and then for me, I remember being gifted this opportunity to land in a New York City creative agency, and that was a learning. Like, that was like, how do I survive this?
Mm-hmm.
Right? How do I survive this treadmill on 10.0 that doesn't slow down for anybody? And then and I just want to be a creative, and I got to sort of be a certain way and live here. It's like fear, 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 fear.
Yes.
And so maybe part of this is building curriculum at the college level, at the high school level. And I will say, I'm doing some work with a few colleges, and the students do talk about mental health. Those words never, that like mental health never came out of my mouth one time when I was there. And like, to hear multiple have that awareness of that this is an issue is a good starting point. I really do believe that.
I love the kids. It's beautiful.
To the future.
Yes. Well, Ryan, before we say goodbye, tell everybody where they can find you and Courageous Brands and all the good things.
Uh, well, first of all, like, just to touch on the point you said, like, if anybody is really interested in getting to the core of who they are,
Mm-hmm.
and um, then please email me at ryanberman@couragebrands.com. And one of the things that I think Eddie Bauer, it's an interesting business having this conversation with you, because I think we have the wrong idea, like this North Star thing anyway, that the North Star is out in the distance, because I think the North Star is something you've got to find inside you. It's not something that you're chasing out in the world. And it starts to me with, I'm not saying Eddie Bauer is suggesting that. I just think it's ironic that you're a Live Your Adventure brand, and when I think of outdoor brands, the North Star always seems to come up. But
Yeah, it's the soul of the brand.
yeah, which is on the inside. And I think we have not done a great job in understanding our own personal core values. And so, I will gladly send you the personal core values assessment. The amount of time that I've now saved in my life by having those clear on who I
Mm-hmm.
spend my time with, who I don't, people that make me feel bad about myself, because they're really just violating my values. It's not their fault. They're wired differently too, right? So email me at ryanberman@couragebrands.com, and I will send that to you, and start working on like getting yourself clear on why you're wired the way that you are, and then start surrounding yourself with those people. If you're an Instagram person, I'm at Ryan Berman on Instagram. There might be an underscore in there, but you can find me easy. Um, if the book seems interesting, again, it's called Return on Courage. I do think that any business, being or brand, can return on the courage platform. We just need to learn how to do it in a calculated way versus a careless way. That's at returnoncourage.com. Or if you want the book to come directly to you, there's a small company called Amazon that has it. They can bring it right to you. And then if you want to learn more about couragebrands.com, or we just launched the leadership side, which is courageous.io. And we're having a lot of fun trying to help people just think more courageously.
I love it. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you.